The man who led the city of Jacksonville from 2003 to 2011 is being recognized with a OneJax Humanitarian Award. Here to talk about it is former Mayor John Peyton. Welcome.
Thanks, Ann.
Nice to see you. Also here, the CEO of OneJax, Elizabeth Andersen. Welcome back, Elizabeth.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. John Peyton, you've been selected as the recipient of the OneJax Silver Medallion. What does it mean to you to be a humanitarian?
Well, first of all, let me just say, OneJax, I'm glad to be able to help them out in a small way. It's one of the few organizations in town that really works at providing a safe and respectful environment to have meaningful conversations about our differences. And in this world we live in, I think there's a higher demand for that than we've ever seen. OneJax has got a great history of just bringing people together, and I've been working with them for many years with community suppers and other efforts that they administer to help bring people together. And so this award, just being a part of this, is really a small way to contribute to what they do. And I'm honored to be recognized, but I'm more proud of the work they do in our city.
Elizabeth, what is it that these awards are designed to do? What is the goal?
Sure. I think that for OneJax, our ability to be able to recognize and honor the contributions that these individuals have made in our community, or in some cases, have a larger footprint outside of Jacksonville area, is not only to say thank you for the work that they've done, but also to inspire the other people in our community to strive toward these humanitarian values. When we are all working toward helping one another and giving back and being more selfless, then our community will thrive.
And are these names, obviously John Peyton's a pretty well-known subject, but are these names that people will recognize, or are they surprises? Are they known commodities, or are they little-known people in the community?
I think that their footprint is impactful, right? In the communities where they are helping, they're very well known, and I think across the board, most of our humanitarian honorees are pretty well known. I'm excited to be able to share their stories this year as we go into our 55th Humanitarian Awards
Yeah.
celebration.
So, John, we mentioned that you were mayor 2003 to 2011. How has the city changed in the interval since that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think well, our politics have gotten a lot more divisive for sure. Which is unfortunate. But I think when I look at our community, we're experiencing phenomenal growth, great job creation. I think our downtown is on the verge of taking off. This is it's been I think a frustration of everyone who's ever sat in the mayor's office of really having downtown come into its own. I'm seeing now all those pieces and parts come together to where I think we're having the critical number of residents coming to our town. We have construction of many more units. I think it's an exciting time. Florida is growing in leaps and bounds, and I think our area has been discovered as a place for great living and great economic opportunity. And shame on us if we don't manage that well. And I think that's our challenge: is how we strike that balance to protect the quality of life that we enjoy while we experience record growth. But I'm optimistic about our future. I think this is a good place to be, great place to call home, and I think others have realized that we've got a pretty good deal here.
Yeah, there's so many people have moved into the area. Obviously, people are glad to call it home. But in my sense, and I think in the sensibility of a lot of people, downtown just really seems to have a lot less vitality than it did when you were in office, when your predecessor was in office, and in the years that preceded it.
I see that, but I'm also encouraged with when you look at the capital investment we're seeing. I think it's going to change, and we've always said, getting a critical mass of residents in the core is that's the game changer, and that's what's going to make the difference. And I'm seeing that when you look at the number of units that are coming on stream. I think when you get your critical mass of residents, then the grocery store makes sense, then the coffee shop makes sense, and then your retail, and having a vibrant street life, and residents enjoying restaurants in our waterfront. So the bones of our downtown are fantastic. We have a beautiful downtown. It's centrally located in our region. It's where we come together. We come together for church. We come together for sports, for arts, for library. The great library. Our government is headquartered there. So there are a lot of fundamentals that are strong. I just think we need to get people there, and I think housing is where you start.
I wonder, the places that we typically go and enjoy as ordinary folk, tend to be places where there's a lot of like neat little shops, right?
Right.
Little restaurants, little shops, neighborhoods that kind of build up somewhat
Mhm.
organically. I wonder if if it's, all of the incentives that the city has given to big businesses, to big
Mhm.
enterprises to try to, catalyze growth. If there isn't a path or perhaps a possibility that, several of those millions of dollars could be used to incentivize small businesses as
Mhm.
opposed to larger, anchors.
Right. Well, so we've tried that in the past, and I remember when I was there, and this was many years ago, we had a Starbucks downtown that paid no rent, and it was basically it was trying to create a catalyst, but they could not make it. You have to have the foot traffic, you have to have the customer base, and we just haven't had that. So I think we once you
What if you
start,
just pay people to live downtown? Have you thought about
well,
it?
I think we really are in many ways, aren't we? I mean, with the subsidies that we're seeing for the housing units, these units are being heavily subsidized, and I'm not sure there's any other way to do it at this point. Once you get to that critical mass and you develop, a pattern of success, I think the free market will take over. But I think you have to have a little nudge. And by the way, it makes sense for us to invest in downtown. You're not recreating community. You're not rebuilding infrastructure. You have infrastructure, fire stations, schools, libraries, a lot of venues for entertainment. So in many ways, as opposed to urban sprawl, it makes more sense to encourage and incentivize people to be downtown. So I think it's a good investment, and long term, it will pay off. If you look at our tax base in the urban core, it's a huge contributor to our revenue, and it will be even bigger and larger if we're able to get the critical mass of residents.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking to former Jacksonville Mayor John Peyton and OneJax CEO Elizabeth Andersen. John Peyton is the recipient of a OneJax Humanitarian Award. And if you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org, or you can reach out and tag us on social media. We have a call from Susan in Mandarin. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Hi, I have two quick questions. I'll make them really quick. And the first one is there is a lot of like angry, nasty rhetoric. And how can we as citizens, besides not doing it ourselves, how can we encourage our politicians and candidates to stop doing that? And my second real quick question, and you partly just answered this as I was holding, but why? I understand that former Mayor Peyton is a Republican, and usually Republicans are like pushing towards free market. So why should we as taxpayers subsidize something downtown if other areas like the town center are more successful? Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks, Susan. I mean, that is
That's
kind
a
of
really good question, and so the way I look at it is, you have people moving to our region, and the question is, where do you put them? If you go into the rural areas, which we call sprawl, typically, there's enormous expense associated with putting in the roads, putting in the schools, putting in the fire stations, creating the infrastructure to support those houses. So there's a lot of money in the front end, and a very minimal return on investment. If you encourage people to come to your urban core, you have all the infrastructure. It's already in place. You have police coverage. You have fire stations. You have streets and drainage. So from a dollars and cents perspective, you're not recreating a very expensive community to accommodate future growth. And you have a density factor. We don't have really high density in rural areas, but you do have high density in the urban core where you can go up and get more bang for your buck for the taxpayer. So I think that I think explains how you can justify. And remember, a lot of the incentives we're giving are basically ways to create tax value that otherwise would not have been there, and letting the developers share in that value. So really, the value the developer is creating in the tax base is being shared, a value that otherwise probably would not have been there. So, but it's a legitimate question, and I think we should challenge our policymakers to explain the return on investment. Why is this good for me as a taxpayer to make this investment?
sure. And I mean, to be fair, some of those incentives are tax breaks, right?
Right,
So that revenue isn't realized. It's just a way to get them to break ground and
right.
to build. What about Susan's question about the rhetoric? I mean, you alluded to it earlier, that we're in a more divisive time. I mean, how do you feel that's impacting us at the local level? Obviously, we know that national politics are riven with, you know, partisanship.
Right. Well, I think there's just a lot of frustration. I sense there's a lot of frustration among the electorate about the way things are going, and people feel like the freedoms in some shape, way, or form are being taken away from them, and someone else is getting more. And I think the way you try to resolve that is through dialogue, and I think OneJax is that organization that really provides that venue where you can have meaningful conversations with people from different backgrounds, with different perspectives, and I think it's very possible to disagree with someone in a respectful way. And have meaningful dialogue and understand what happened to them along the way, what experiences in their life caused them to take the view they have, and increase the understanding of that and maybe the perspective of that. And not to say that you're going to agree with them, but listen, there's a lot more we agree on than we disagree on, and I may not agree with you, but at least I understand why you hold this view, what shaped your thinking that caused you to think like this. So the dialogue is critical, and I think we have a tendency to go into our corner and just watch stations that feed our pre-existing perceptions, listen to shows that feed our preconceived notion, we just, as individuals, we have to reach outside our comfort zone to really walk in the shoes of another person and say it's not arbitrary. Their views and their perspectives are not arbitrary. There's a reason they think the way they think, and by understanding that, maybe we can have a civil conversation on how to move forward. Listen, the great thing about this country is we have diversity of people and opinions and experiences, and I think the art of our democracy is to continue to have that in a respectful way, to where we can move forward together, not always agreeing, but always being respectful. And OneJax is the one organization in town that wakes up every day thinking about how can we bring people together, and where can we convene these conversations to hopefully hold our community together.
I think on the person-to-person level that OneJax facilitates, we do kind of recognize each other as humans and are able to make that connection. I mean, what fault do you lay at the foot of the political leadership in terms of fomenting divisiveness? It is a benefit, really, to create that rift and to, that has been a successful tool to political, conquest.
Well, I think really one of the things that's led to it is the way we've basically drawn our political districts. We don't have districts that have a mix of diverse opinions and partisan perspectives, and so what ends up happening is the kind of the outlying perspectives of any given political party, be it Democratic or Republican, tend to call the shots, and the primary becomes the end all be all, and so the primary is filled with people that are not necessarily in the middle; they're toward the fringe of their perspectives, and I think that's really driving. The primary politics are really driving what kind of candidates we have, and then you get in the general, and you've got two extremes from both parties, and the middle is often left out, and there's not a discussion in the middle ground, and so listen, there's plenty of finger pointing here, but I think the partisanship I think is become just really too powerful in our politics, and there's when I look at Jacksonville here, the issues we're dealing with are not partisan issues. We've got to pave the roads, we've got to pay for a stadium, we need a new jail. We want to protect our quality of life. We want to have the best park system, not just the biggest park system. We want to have the best park system. These are not partisan issues. And so we really need to be focused on, the end goal here and not on the partisan bickering. And that's the part.
What was your take on the Jacksonville mayoral election on that front?
Yeah. Well, I was, Daniel Davis, a dear friend of mine. I was a supporter of his. And of course, Mayor Deegan was elected. I enjoy my relationship with her. I think she's in the office for the right reasons, and she's trying hard. But it was a brutal campaign to watch, and the amount of money that was spent.
Do you think it was equally brutal on both sides, or do you think it was more brutal? I mean, I think that there was a perception that Mayor Deegan was trying to be a little bit more conciliatory and to the middle, and that some of that ugliness, like the Black Lives Matter ads and stuff, was really coming from the GOP.
I think there was plenty of blame to spread in all directions. I know the Republicans themselves were the most brutal on each other before you even got to the general. So I think there's a lot of damage done in the general election. Republicans beating up on Republicans, and then the winners making it to the general coming out of the primary were basically wounded, and I think Daniel had a hard time uh, getting back on his feet after the brutal primary. But it's just it was unfortunate, not only the quality of the ads but the volume of them. When I ran for mayor, it's about $1 million campaign. This was a $9 million campaign for one candidate, which is just hard to comprehend that kind of investment. But yeah, it's a tough business.
Want to take a call from our friend Stanley on the north side. Good morning, Stanley. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning, John, too. Um, and I agree with you. I agree with one Jacksonville, and I agree with the first caller. But I disagree with the mayor because he's looking from the top. Everything he talks about is from the top up. You talked about uh, the stadium. You talked about the jail, but you're not talking about quality of life for the city of Jacksonville. And I got the data to show that the better Jacksonville was a colossal failure. Thank you.
Yeah, we should say Better Jacksonville obviously was your predecessor's footprint, John Delaney, but it was something that
Right.
we still see
It was
to
in the
this
inbox.
day. It was in the inbox.
He passed it. I got to build a lot of it. Listen,
And finance a
yeah,
lot of it.
right, finance a lot of it, um, yeah, I was proud of our community rallying around the Better Jacksonville plan. It was a huge $2.2 billion investment in our community. We had a lot of great libraries, a lot of good roads. Um, the courthouse wasn't overly popular, but we needed one.
Oh
So
boy.
it moved the needle. It moved the needle on a lot of things that we needed. But listen, I think quality of life is what makes this place special. And one thing that I was never able to do that I was always wanting to do is really invest in our park system. We have the largest park system in the United States of America here, and it deserves our investment. And so, and those are the kind of things I think our caller was referring to is where the rubber meets the road, the things I interact with, how the traffic flows, what kind of park we have, is the library open, are we mowing the medians, things of that nature.
Yeah, and that is the essential question. It kind of echoed here in an email we got from Mark saying, I wonder if we are spending our tax dollars in a manner that is prudent on stadium deals, beach nourishment, downtown renewal, when I can't drive out of my neighborhood on Bunker Hill in the '08 without getting punched in the kidneys by every bump. I mean, there is always the issue of potholes, nonpartisan potholes, right? Um, I want to ask you, Elizabeth, in terms of, you know, overcoming some of that rhetoric at the local level, is there any work that OneJax does to engage politicians directly? I mean, other than, kind of through this honorary um, system of recognizing humanitarians.
Sure. I mean, I think the work of OneJax has been to be a convener. Sometimes that is very publicly and openly with the community and hosting civil discourse and community suppers. And sometimes that is behind the scenes. Those are phone calls, those are personal relationships, those are building allies, so that we can move initiatives forward that help build a culture of connection throughout Jacksonville. OneJax has gone through a lot of transition ourselves over the last several years. And so it is a priority for us to continue to build those relationships. I know before the election, for example, I picked up the phone and I called one of our Republican council members and I said, hey, if we need to get to a place in the community where we have a bipartisan coming together, making sure that this community sticks together, regardless of the outcome of the election, can I count on you? And that person said yes. Yep, you can count on me. And so, being able to put those pathways in place, and hopefully not having to use them, right? I mean, those were the conversations that we were having then. But, if we need to be able to bring together our elected officials, that's certainly a priority for me.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, our community and the well being of the people, regardless of partisanship, I think is most important. And I do believe that our elected officials, believe that in their hearts as well.
John, I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you a little bit about one of your former staffers, Susie Wiles, who has
Mhm.
been sort of a through line in a lot of the shift to the farther right in Florida. Certainly, helmed Donald Trump's initial
Mhm.
Florida
Mhm.
campaign, which was a surprise win for him in Florida. Then she led Rick Scott in defeating the establishment
Mhm.
candidate. She led uh, Ron DeSantis in defeating the establishment
Mhm.
GOP candidate. Um, and now she's obviously the chief of staff for the incoming president.
Clearly, probably one of the most powerful positions in the world. I mean, really, if you think about it. And I'm really proud of Susie. I had the privilege of working with her. She was in my administration for many years, led probably what I would say are the most significant public policy initiatives in my term. She certainly was helpful in crafting Rally Jacksonville, which is our early learning and literacy effort. Jacksonville Journey was under her responsibility, and also the River Accord, which was a $700 million investment in improving water quality in the St. Johns River. So she's probably one of the smartest, hardest working people I've ever been exposed to. I was a little surprised when she became part of the Trump team. Really, she's always been moderate in my opinion, but I take great comfort in knowing she's around the table
Do
in that
you?
administration. That gives me comfort. I think she has sound judgment.
Do you
She's
need comforting? I mean, are you concerned about this
don't
presidency?
we all need comforting? Regardless of your political persuasion, I think we all need comforting. But it, so I think, I, yeah, these are really uncertain times. I mean, there's just a lot going on, and knowing that I know someone that is of sound mind and that I've worked with is gives me great a deal of comfort that she's there at the table, and I just hope he listens to her. That's the main thing. If he listens to her, I think we'll be fine.
I want to ask you because you brought up the Jacksonville journey, and that's
Mhm.
something that the current mayor, Donna Deegan, has been trying to rekindle. It was, an anti-crime
Right.
effort that
Mhm.
was seen to have some immediate success in a time of rising homicide rates. And, after that program ended, the rate sort of resumed unabated to continue to rise.
Mhm.
Have you been in touch with Mayor Deegan about her efforts to bring back the journey? What are your thoughts
I
about this?
have, and I'm impressed with her commitment to bring it back. I can't take a lot of personal credit for the journey. It was really the work product of about 120 community leaders that we brought together to really develop a blueprint for how do we move forward and reduce violence in our city. We had tremendous results. The numbers were phenomenal. We had great reduction. We had great community buy-in. We invested in a lot of non-traditional remedies. Historically, we always invest in more enforcement, more police officers on the street, but we actually spend a great deal of time and resource focusing on prevention and intervention, which is the long-term solution. Yeah, I think the mayor is committed to this concept. She is surrounding herself with people that were very involved when I was there. Debbie Burgess, W.C. Gentry, folks that know the journey and know the success and how we administer it. It is not an inexpensive venture, and money is tight at City Hall. So finding a way to strike that balance is going to be important. But the long term difference makers with the journey was really investing in our children. Um, you can't get to them too soon. Transforming our daycare centers from custodial care to learning care and really focusing on early learning and literacy. After school programming was a huge, huge component of that success. Keeping kids busy, intellectually engaged around positive mentors, as opposed to just wandering the streets after school, which was no surprise the most dangerous time in Jacksonville. So those efforts have got to be invested in, and those are long-term solutions. You're not going to have immediate results from that, and it's hard for policyholders to um, make those type of investments because it's not immediate. It's a long-term investment. And I think one of the challenges we have, what I call the price of democracy, is we have these wholesale changes every 4 or 8 years, and it's hard to have programs like this survive time. I'd love it if, Jacksonville Journey was never interrupted. I think we'd be in a different place. I think Rally Jacksonville, our early learning and literacy component, was really important for crime fighting and for having a vibrant contributing workforce. So the staying power is the challenge, and I'll go back to OneJax and all these great not for profits that really take the long view. They're not responding to the winds of the politics of the day. They're able to focus on long term goals with investment over time that hopefully will persuade policymakers to help in ways they can with a longer term vision that can ultimately improve our city.
Well, former Mayor John Peyton, congratulations on your recognition from OneJax as a one silver
Thank you.
medallion humanitarian. And Elizabeth Anderson, thank you so much for being here this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
All right. Thank